Well, there was well, there was 1 minute to go, but who gives a shit? You know, we might as well just get on and get going. I'm still waiting for Jared. He's probably still preparing his food. So, yeah, what can you do? Sort of playing around with the background sort of thing, just sort of seeing how that looks, you know. I did the Corona thing, the video that looked pretty good, sort of the background, the virus flanking me from both ends. So I'm amusing myself basically, you know. You got to laugh with yourself sometimes, so you got to amuse yourself in that regard. Yeah, how are people? There's a few people here. G'day, Deborah. Honest. Luke is always here early. Fapnado's been, practicing Russian. Good for him. And the word bugs my brain a lot for some reason, because of how it's usually said. Okay. More Russian words. Anyway. Yeah, I sort of got late onto this Bart's sort of comical session today. So I sort of missed the first part of it. I haven't seen it yet, so I'll have to go back and watch it. And I haven't seen Pim's yet either, which is sort of unfortunate. As people know, I had a late session last night with a live stream and, talking about the coronavirus and all that sort of stuff. And, and basically sort of the risks and what to do and, some of the do's and don'ts, some of the nonsense that's out there. I had one guy that kept on pestering me continuously with a whole lot of, sort of this and that type of conspiracy type thing. I answered a couple of them, just putting them at bay and all that sort of stuff, and I sort of made out how ridiculous, if that was a bioweapon, the Chinese should just give up. It's a joke. It's even weaker than SARS or MERVA. But I mean, what do you do? People just like to sometimes they want to look. It's not as if there aren't bad people out there in the world. They do exist, that there aren't some wicked people within the elites that are really nasty and evil and have got really sort of, nasty sort of thoughts that go through their heads. But there are people that in the non-elites that have similar thoughts. I mean, there are people that are, that have such ideas and people that don't. So, I mean, we need to realize that, we live in a world which is a rich tapestry, as Luke would say, of people and ideas and views and behaviors. So, it's one of those things, we just need to, sometimes I say just chill out and focus on the real essentials, stuff that we can evidence. We could talk about, we can speculate about all sorts of things, but unless we can evidence something, it's basically just, idle speculation. It doesn't help anyone. It just confuses everyone, and it ends up, sort of doing more, indirect harm in some regards. It depends on the circumstances, so yeah. Reckon next time Bart, Harry, live. Look, I do a lot of live streams with Bart, and and as I've said with Bart, if you've got nobody available and you're really desperate, just basically drop me a line and I'll come on. I don't mind, in that regard. But I don't want to be. I've got my own channel, and he's got his own channel, and I basically, what he does bring on a lot of people is really good. I've sort of, me and Jarrett seem to sort of, as my sort of co-host, when he comes on, we sort of work really well because we sort of balance each other in different ways. We have different different bits of knowledge, things that I'm not aware of that Jared is aware of, and and likewise. And there are a lot of you could say things to do with because he investigates all sorts of things with getting access to foods and all sorts of things that are things that people are interested in. Yeah, look, about the I just noticed the last part, air fryers. It's not something that really interests me, to be honest. I have some issues with air fryers because in terms of microplastics, a lot of them actually are cheap. They've got microplastics. And I think it's, there could be issues there related where sort of estrogen mimicking compounds from the plastics could end up in the food. And so, I'm lukewarm about air fryers, to put it that way. There's no studies that I can point to either way. But when there's plastic components and heat, I tend to sort of take the cautionary approach and say, look, I'll steer away from that sort of things. I prefer things like, frying with tallow and lard. I prefer basically, grilling, baking, roasting, these sort of things, I know that have been done for millennia. Things like also soups, boiling. These are things that have been done for millennia by all sorts of people, and it's safe. There's no real issue there to really worry about, and that's my sort of attitude towards that. I mean, it could be completely fine in that regard. But I don't really know enough about air fryers, their technology, and so I tend to be my sort of attitude is be cautious when it comes to these sort of things. We still need to look. We still need to look at basically wait until there's a bit more science on those sort of things. It's the same thing with plastics. I'm a bit wary. I tend to use my sort of stuff is stainless steel. I think stainless steel, iron cast, those sort of things are fairly safe. Historically being used. Outside those sort of things, I tend to basically, because when I look at the ancestral, I look at the, like the ancient Greeks and all that, and look at how they used to grill a lot of things. So there's a lot of, safety there. I lived in the 70s in Greece as a youngster doing my high school there, and I saw a lot of people that basically were so pretty much grilling a lot of foods like organ meats and a lot of things like the kokoretsu I've shown you guys in the past. And I didn't see pathology. I didn't see cancer rates or heart disease or any of these sort of things. It was my grandfather died from pneumonia. His brother died from pneumonia as well. These are the sort of things, communicable diseases and pneumonia that used to, most people used to die from old age. Oh, he got pneumonia, died, got a bit sick. Those were the things that people were dying from. They weren't dying from heart disease in the 70s. They weren't dying, especially in Greece, where still, Americana type, fast food and processed food hadn't penetrated yet. I mean, that happened later in the sort of 90s in Greece or early 2000s, where that sort of penetrated, which was long after I'd already moved back to Australia. When I came back to Australia in the 80s, that's when it was starting to emerge in the 80s. There was more processed food. There was more sort of a push for the low fat approach back in the 80s, and that was it. I came back in the mid 80s. and there was that strong push for that sort of dietary approach, and it was a very different time. But I actually saw the transition between real food and fake food. So, so I've got a historical, not merely, I've read books and have a historical understanding of that sort of stuff, but I basically have, a strong sort of, deep understanding of, how this came about and the sort of forces that were involved in stuff like that. Anyway, I wonder where our dear friend just how's that coming across? Is that coming across okay? My audio? Because I noticed when I did the other one, the coronavirus, there was a bit, it wasn't as good as it normally is. So I'm just anyone, Luke, just tell me if it's sounding good. So let me just go through. I'm still waiting on Jared to sort of appear. He's cooking, he's air frying his steak. So we'll have to wait. So let's talk about the Discord. I suspect that's Bart's one. Yeah, go on. I sort of appear now and then, take a quick look, and then go. I'm a moderator on there, but I turn up and take a bit of a squeeze and all that. I probably, at some stage I'll try and spend a bit of more time. Yeah, look, exactly. There's a potential of it degrading. I've heard things like that, but yeah, look, there's a lot of anecdotes stuff there that these things can be a bit of an issue. But yeah, I'm still not sure about a lot of that sort of stuff. Yeah, I feel a bit wretched today. I sort of didn't get really much sleep last night. I sort of, looked at the mirror and go, oh God, your eyes are sort of, I didn't really get good sleep. It's one thing, normally I go earlier than 2:30, and it's knocked me about a bit. 54 after all, can't handle late nights. Another comment. That's true. You can't go wrong, basically stainless steel, cast iron, ceramics. Now, with ceramics, you have to be careful. If it's, 100% ceramic, stuff like that, not a problem. If it's basically this sort of, fake sort of ceramic and stuff like that, yeah, that can be a problem. It can actually come off, and sort of you can get certain heavy metals and stuff like that. So you've got to be careful. Sometimes, it's worthwhile paying a bit extra to get a quality stuff that will last forever, or many years at least. I'll just cycle through a few of these comments that you guys are making. Yeah, exactly, the heavy metal side of things. Some of the traditional stuff, the way it's made is good, but some of the is full of heavy metals. You really have to find out, and I remember there was a company in Greece. They really made really good ceramics in the old traditional way that they would have made, and there was less of a problem. Harry, things that have changed a lot in Indonesia too over the last 20 years. Yeah, exactly. That's true. Things have changed in Indonesia. I mean, I remember back in the early this is quite a few years back now. What am I looking at? God, because I'd hadn't gone into Asia for a while. When I sort of, as a youngster, I did a lot of, I sort of traveled and gone through part of Asia, then in my sort of 20s, um, sort of mid sort of 20s to 30s, I was involved in a lot of like community stuff, politics and shit like that, and got too involved with a lot of other things with organisations. I just didn't travel as much through that period, and I sort of started traveling after that, and then basically when I was 38 or 39, I can't remember, was when I actually sort of returned back to Indonesia for after a long period of time that I haven't, and I've been back and forward, especially to Bali and and other parts of Southeast Asia, and yeah, things have changed quite a bit throughout that whole part. Also on the dietary front, God Almighty, you would go into stores and stuff like that, there would be hardly any processed food. Now you go and it's just wall to wall processed food. It's no different than Australia, the US, or any other country. It's completely dramatically changed, and yeah, thanks for letting me know. So yes, unfortunately, and this is why some of my friends in Indonesia have got diabetes and coming down with all sorts of things and stuff like that. So it's sort of unfortunately, in that regard, that they've gone down that path. A few more comments about the sound. Good. Thanks, guys. And let me try and get to a few. Oops. I went past. Pepnado, 100% ceramic coating. Yep. It's as long as it's 100%. That's the sort of stuff that's fine. I mean, because I've got like white ceramics which are 100%, and obviously you need, because they do heat up as a ceramic. You need those sort of hand gloves to pick it up so you don't burn yourself. But they're easy to clean. That's the thing. Bit underwater, a bit of soap, done. They're very easy in that regard. So far easier than stainless steel or anything like that. So I do use them sometimes for for certain meals in that regard. Oops. The GABA stuff that I mentioned earlier, in regards to that. I think that was in regards to, was that with the corona thing as well? Yeah, it's look, if you consider it that to have an animal-based diet that basically will make you calmer, yes. When it comes to medication, I mean, I think that if you can move away from medication and get to real foods, I think that's far better for people long term. It's a safer way to go. But and it's no different. I mean, there was another one that I can't remember who asked me, and that was, what was it again? Hydroxy chloride, and that's actually, I wasn't sure what that was, and I said, look, got no idea, because they'd heard it somewhere, and then I checked, and it's and it's in regards to lupus, and I said, look, I did a bit of a Google search to see whether we're with respiratory infections, in terms of this medication, like pneumonia, and I couldn't find anything. So I don't think even that has any real effect. When it comes to pneumonia and stuff like that, you're really looking at things like the fat-soluble vitamins, in particular vitamin D3, that is protective of the lungs, and some of the other sort of information that I provided as well, that people should sort of consider in that regard. I still have 70-year-old cooked earth, from my grand. Oh yeah, look, some of that old traditional stuff is, from mud-based type, they last forever, basically. I mean, you just have to look at the stuff from antiquity and whatever, it's still around. It's put on display in museums nowadays. I think I mentioned it. I've mentioned that before, Luke. Yeah, so I've already covered that and sort of how that actually has an effect where you actually are able to increase the load while you're younger. The younger you are, the older you get, the much harder it is to actually increase those myonuclei in the actual muscle fibers. So it's just, so if you're young, do it, because even if you stop exercising in a later age, when you go back to exercising, there's like a muscle memory. You can reactivate those myonuclei. They're still there, and they will basically build up muscle more rapidly. And I saw that with my father, where he was before he was into small business, he was a Boilermaker welder, and he used to do, he used to have massive muscles, on him, and it all came back really rapidly. So really important when you're in as in your young years. The younger you are, to do sort of lift weights and stuff like that and build up the myonuclei because you'll find it in front of you, and it will be very protective in terms of sarcopenia and things like that in the future. G'day, mate.
Hey, just a second here. Had the stream running, so I was hearing you twice.
Yeah.
I made
Okay.
it. I made it with enough food to get me through the next couple hours.
Good for you. Good for you. God almighty. These ravenous carnivores.
Yeah, no, I'm doing what I can for my immune system. See, I went to the gym, so I got my exercise, and then I did a super hot bath, so got my environmental hormesis, and then I finished that with cold shower afterward, and now I'm having my fat soluble vitamins with my scrambled eggs.
That's it.
And
I actually had scrambled eggs last night with a nice piece of steak.
I mean, it's going to sound funny to say, but one of the things I like about carnivore for me is that it can almost be a mono diet, that takes the thinking out of food.
That's right.
I can almost eat the same thing every meal, and I feel great.
Yeah, precisely. That's sort of. Let me just get rid of my background because it's so we seem similar. Yeah, I decided to put the background, me, just to basically make it all. I might as well show I've got my Aerosmith sort of t-shirt on. So wearing this last night. I only put it on for the live stream last night, so it's still not. It still hasn't got enough perspire, to be smelly yet, so I can put it on again without having any consequences.
It also hasn't gotten enough airtime.
That's exactly right. So it needs a bit of more airtime. Exactly. Yes. Let me just scoot down. Patricia, depends on the glazed. Yeah, sort of. We're again on the sort of the cookware. We've been sort of covering the sort of cookware information.
Oh yeah, just before I checked into the live stream quickly just to let you know I was going to be right along, and then I saw that I think it was Honest was asking about using an air fryer.
Yep.
Did you address that?
Yeah, I sort of have concerns about, especially the cheaper brands that are not metal based but have got plastics, that potentially microplastics from the temperature could basically get into the food and stuff like that over time as they degrade. So that's sort of my concern, and that's one reason why I haven't really gone for an air fryer. Yeah, it is convenient, but a lot of things that we do are convenient. Fast food is convenient. A lot of things, they're not necessarily healthy for you just because they're convenient. So we need to be careful.
I've been using air fryer pretty regularly since September.
So what sort of?
I just have the Ninja one.
Okay.
And it would be on the more cost effective end for sure. It's like around $130, $100 US, I think. But it has a stainless steel rack, so you're not touching the nonstick. But it doesn't clean very well. So like the element that's in the top of it there, where all the splatter from the fat goes up, you have to actually like disassemble it with a screwdriver to get it to take the element out to clean it.
Okay.
clearly not really meant to be serviced like that very often.
Mm.
So it's definitely not going to be the last air fryer that I buy. I think there's a good one that Cuisinart makes now that's like solid stainless steel inside.
That probably is better.
That's
Yeah,
what I would go for now.
I
Yeah.
that's exactly, a stainless steel type. I've heard about them, the stainless steel ones.
Yeah, that one's. I think it's like a combination like toaster oven. It's meant to be
Yep.
like a countertop convection oven type deal,
Mm.
basically.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
think,
basically what an air fryer is, right? So
I think that's the best way to go in that regard.
but
Um,
yeah, health concerns aside from the actual air fryer itself, they do a great job for food.
yep. Now Deborah's actually asking about high meats. I've tried them. I'm not against them. It's not something that I sort of gravitate towards. Nothing favourite in that regard. And I mean, like any fermented food, it has its value, but don't overdo it. It's like anything. I mean, we need a certain amount of fermented foods for good sort of acid loving bacteria. And it's usually because sometimes we'll have a bit of illness, we'll have these sort of irregularities and stuff like that will happen, and sometimes it's a good to as a probiotic, an animal
Mm,
source probiotic. That's what traditional people would have used it for. It wouldn't have been a regular sort of thing that they would have consumed.
right. Yeah, I've heard good things about using it in small amounts. I haven't personally heard, or I haven't personally known anybody who's made themselves sick with it.
No,
Although
neither have I.
it can cause some upset stomach if you eat too much of it at once. So the key that
Mm,
I've heard anyway from high meat, I haven't made it myself, is that you need to eat small bits of it every time that you open the jar to air it.
yeah,
So
precisely.
as it's fermenting, you're slowly introducing that culture and not a huge bacterial load at once the first time that you try it.
Mm, yeah. I mean, our digestive system, if you from the stomach right through to until your colon, all that part doesn't really, it's not very healthy when it has a lot of bacteria around. Let's put it that way. This is why that whole first part of the digestive tract is so acidic. It's basically to kill off anything that's coming in and to minimize what gets in. So, and that's important for people to remember. At the end of the day, the body, it's only the acid loving bacteria that usually will grow in fermented stuff that get through, and that's fine because they actually can be quite beneficial, not in excessive amounts, but in small amounts can be quite beneficial in our bodies. At some point, I'll do a gut microbiome type thing covering that sort of stuff. I've spoken in the past about how certain, when you're eating plant foods, you upregulate, Prevotella, which increases inflammatory, especially when it's in excessive amounts, like you would on a vegan or vegetarian diet, and or in today's sort of high carb, sad diets. You tend to basically upregulate too much Prevotella, and that can be pro-inflammatory. And there are studies that show that, where the animal-based, bacteria doesn't actually, you don't get as much growth, and it's far more balanced in that regard. So there are less issues. While people try and make issues, but it's all associational and it's all people that are based. It's not clinical. It's associational based on people that have, on a sad diet. So I basically just ignore all that. It's like all the other epidemiological nonsense out there. It's when you're doing proper, clinical studies and, separating all the confounding factors, that's when you can actually see whether, one works or the other doesn't. It's a bit like the study that they did on the fiber, people having fiber or having no fiber, and seeing dramatic results and improvements in gut health without the fiber, because the diet was the same. All they did was to change the fiber component, and by not, playing around and creating a whole lot of other confounders, they were able to basically work out that people did see substantial differences, in that regard.
Yeah, fiber is a funny
Osmar.
one. Fiber is the first question I always get from anybody about when I tell them to do a carnivore diet is how do you poop without fiber?
Yeah. In regards to GABA, there are a lot of mixed studies in regards to that. I think they're going to be different levels in different people, and there are going to be variations. And then, how much GABA helps or doesn't help in terms of autoimmunity and stuff like that is hard to say. It's so the look, nobody's actually been able to pin it down with good clinical studies. So it's very murky, the whole field. And I usually say that at the end of the day, stop looking at these sort of, GABA or all these sort of issues. Fix the stomach. Everything else flows from that. That's one thing I've seen with people when I've ever told them, fix your stomach, and they fix their stomach, improving the acidity of their stomach, improving their digestion, everything seems to magically disappear. So I think that's fundamental. When you're actually looking at it in a reductionist way at the end and trying to, add this supplement, add that supplement, trying to get, but you haven't fixed the underlying issues that are there, which are usually gut related, in particular the stomach. That is, and this is why as people get older and their levels of acidity drop, they have more problems. At the same time, elderly people tend to basically also being brainwashed by their doctors to consume less animal products, which actually exacerbates the whole issue of acidity of the stomach. And they tend to be more prone then to more issues regarding to infections and all sorts of other problems. So, the focus should be on the stomach, guys. That's where the secret lies. The big secret out there, it's not complicated. Fix the stomach. Make sure that the pH is low enough to digest things properly, and you won't have deficiencies. You won't have basically a little bacteria getting past a broken gut, a leaky gut, and into your bloodstream and causing all sorts of issues and reactivity and whatever else. The stomach is the main barrier to health. That's why I say, if your acidity isn't low enough, get yourself checked. Look at basically, finding out, finding out where it is, where you are at in terms of acidity, in terms of basically stomach health. You may have H. pylori. It tends to inhibit and candida to some extent as well, but H. pylori far more inhibiting the ability for the stomach to basically produce enough acid. So these are the things that people need to focus on. Now, obviously, if you've been on antacid medication for a long time, what the stomach does is it actually upregulates those receptors in the stomach. So when you come off them, if you come off them really, you end up with overproduction of acid in the stomach. And that can be a problem. But I think that is also a possible strategy as well. Getting on those medications for a very short amount of time, if you're an older person with very poor stomach acid, in order to basically force the stomach to produce more, that means putting yourself through a bit of discomfort for a couple of months, then getting off them, then you'll have more acid producing capability. So it could be a strategy. I know it sounds a bit strange, but sometimes, forcing the body to do something which may be harder just naturally doing it, as it's sort of been reduced because of your dietary approach. Sometimes you need a sort of a sledgehammer to force it back into its old sort of state. Now, I'm not recommending that because I can't. I'm not a doctor, so I can't recommend that. But I think that there may be a biohack for older people. So, I'm not going to, I'm just throwing that out there. No recommendation on my part. I'm not a doctor, so I can't recommend anything. But all I can say is that if it does do that, and we know the literature shows that, maybe that is a biohack for older people who've got poor stomach acid. A short-term biohack, that is, without causing too much.
What does stomach acid pH testing look like? How do they do it?
They usually they put a probe down, where they like an endoscopy type similar thing, and literally are able to. There's I think they give you some sort of mixture to see how the stomach will react. So it's quite invasive in that regard. I don't know whether there's any other method. So I couldn't tell you, but it's a really hard thing to work out. Usually they work it out through an indirect route. When there's low stomach acid, usually you end up with a more overproduction of things like H. pylori. And so so what happens is with a lot of bacterial, there's with SIBO, there's a bit of the hydrogen sort of test, which they can do, which sort of is a way of finding out that your stomach's not working properly. For having SIBO, it's usually a stomach issue. So that's a giveaway. So that's the easiest way rather than doing the invasive thing, going and doing the hydrogen sort of test to see whether you've got something like a SIBO in that regard, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth as it's called. And if you've got SIBO, then you definitely know you've got a stomach issue in that regard. You're not producing enough and all that. Now, you may need to investigate further to find out why. You can try acidification, like using apple cider vinegar and other things, and HD, or using all those sort of pills and stuff like that to increase your acidity each time you have food, try to improve the acidity, get the acidity to a certain level, so then your stomach can start doing it itself. If you're younger, that's possibly much easier to do. If you're really old, it may not be a viable solution. And that other hack, which I didn't give advice about, may be an alternative approach to hack your body to do something that otherwise is very hard to do. So yeah, it's sort of things that I've mentioned to people, but I've said this is not advice. But if I was in your shoes, I probably would do it for a couple of months. Just to, I would suffer a couple of months just to get back stronger stomach acidity again. So that's all I'll say about that subject. But yes, fix the stomach, everything else flows from that. I had to put that up. Just a bit of a poke from Ozma.
I sure am.
Well, you're the youngest. You're the youngest old fart that I know.
I'm old enough to be aware that I'm going to get old.
That's it.
Put it that way.
I think we both are.
Yeah.
Especially me. I don't trust anything about anything made 70 years ago in modern America.
Is that with regard to cookware?
I suspect so. I suspect that's another cookware thing. Yeah, look, I know about Australia. I know about Europe, but I don't really know about. I thought that. Yeah, anyway, I could be wrong about American manufacturing was quite good back then, but then I could be wrong. I won't give a comment on things that I don't know about in that regard. Remember to get your taurine. Yes, that's true. As you're getting older, yeah. Stop reminding me, Luke.
I haven't started supplementing it just yet, but I'm getting it in my meat. Is there a little bit of taurine in raw milk?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know.
Well, it's in my steak anyway.
I know it's in meat, but look, milk isn't the best source of aminos in many regards. It's got a lot. If you consume like the Maasai 3.5 to 4.5 liters, you probably get so much that and with a bit of blood and a bit of animal foods and organ meats that they eat as well, they probably get enough in that regard. But no, I've never heard of taurine being something really high in milk. I think it's only in the flesh, in protein, in high protein type foods.
I could go for 3 or 4 liters a day probably if I if I have an unlimited
So
supply.
could I. So could
I'm
I.
I'm feeling a little bit anxious about my milk supply right now with this travel advisory in place from the
Oh,
Canadian
yes,
government.
yes. Yeah, you would be. Yeah, I'm sort of in the same boat. I spoke to the lady at City Organic, and I sort of gave her a bit of, I told her what to, I said, don't forget your iodine, don't forget your vitamin D and all that. And she really thanked me for, I'm just looking after my milk supply. Oh, well, selfish Harry. Yes, his raw milk supply. But
Yeah, I don't know.
I was honest with her about it. Look, I hope she does it. Because she's a bit older than me, and I hope she, doesn't is it still around after it goes through the population. She's a nice lady. So even though she's vegetarian, she's still a nice lady. I like her anyway. I consider her a friend. Yeah, same sort of principle with cows. No idea. I don't think there is as much. There may be more in cheese, because it's basically concentrated protein primarily. So dark meat, definitely you'll find in chicken, in dark meat and stuff like that. That's a definite. But I'm not sure about the level. You googling it for us?
I'm just seeing what I can find quickly.
Yep. Yep.
All the results are for goat's milk.
Yeah, probably. Goat's milk is the closest to human milk, so it doesn't surprise me that it would have a higher content in that regard. Look, it's not a tea thing, a big tea booster or that. It's an amino. It's an amino transporter. So it actually facilitates the transport of other amino acids. That's its key role, and that's really important, especially when you're getting older, to avoid sarcopenia and muscle wasting diseases. So that's what it is. It has other roles, but one of its main roles and its key importance is basically, and the problem is for the other purposes, it actually gets hijacked by the system because it prioritizes some of these other things, and it's because it expects you to basically be quite carnivorous, so to be getting quite enough from the diet, so you don't need to synthesize as much internally. But the problem is we don't get enough, especially the majority of the population. So, but biology doesn't know that. Biology knows its ancestral situation. It doesn't know that in that regard. So it's really important that we get these sort of things, especially as we're getting older. Anyway, comment. Yeah, so I've mentioned as an amino transporter. Now let me see whatever else. Yep. Fishes as well. Yep. Yeah. Very important for animals as well, for cats and dogs. Yeah, I mean, they actually put it in. I know my sister gets a supplement, a taurine supplement for her cat. So it's really important for animals as well. It's even more important for them. I think cats can't even biosynthesize; they have to get in the diet. So they have to eat meat. It's one reason why you see some of those vegan cats falling apart and dying early. Lack of taurine. They're killing them without realizing. It's just ignorant vegetards that have got no idea about animal physiology. They don't have any idea about human physiology, let alone animal, So, I love fatty milk. I actually put an additional cream in mine. Yes, I'm decadent.
Ooh, I would if I could get like raw cream extra with my milk. That'd be good. All this stuff it has the cream in it.
Yeah, look, it's always hard because to get. I mean, we can get grass fed pastured cream down here, but it's on in some place on the mainland, it's really hard. You get the general sort of run of the mill sort of stuff. I know in New Zealand they can also get really good raw milk and pastured, really high quality pastured, cream. But it's a mixed bag in different countries. Parts of France they can definitely get it. I know. It depends where you are, unfortunately, in that regard. Not an easy. It's a transporter, very important for men and women, So women and men, all humans require it. Cats can't produce it, so whether you're a female cat or a male cat, and where's Necro Kitty when you wanna, you basically need it. Chili dog. I have no problem with, neither do I, mate. I don't have an issue with raw milk as well. I love it, so in that regard.
Yeah, my raw milk supply is jeopardized right now because the Canadian government issued a.
I've got raw milk over here.
Oh yeah, I've got a little bit
with cream,
right
with cream, and I've got the water over here as well.
Yeah, Canadian government issued a warning.
I think the milk.
Canadians to avoid any non-essential international travel because basically they're saying the border could close at any moment. So even though I only need to travel cats. Go ahead. Even though I only need to travel like 1 kilometer over the border, apparently I'm risking getting locked into the United States if I go for raw milk right now.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
I'm like, I really want it, so I don't know. Do I risk it and then just say maybe they won't close the border? And I'm gone like 10 minutes. The store is almost on the border.
Oh.
So it's anyway.
Can you get somebody to basically like ship it from there?
No,
or they won't.
No.
Okay, you can't ship it.
I don't think so.
Oh.
I mean, if this travel advisory goes on for very long, I'll be exploring options to see what I can do, I guess.
I bet you will.
I'm tempted to just try going on Monday, even though it's against my better judgment. Monday is when the shipment.
They used to have special cars with machine guns when they did that back in the 1930s. Just reminding you, get your equipment right.
Yeah, I need a pinstripe suit and a nice was it like a trilby, the hat style?
Oops. Yep, you're right on that point. Yes, you will need it. You definitely will need a suit. One of those nice black hats. So yeah, you got to get the outfit.
Yeah, and a Tommy gun with a drum.
Precisely. Yeah. The right equipment for the right job. Yes, it'll be the first time something is going in the reverse direction. In the past, it was basically moonshine from Canada to the US. This will be the first time it's going back in the other direction. Talking about a flip in history. Okay. One thing I have to mention about secure email services. What are we talking about? What the Germany new law? Okay, they've got new laws on the. As I said, the sort of the Proton Mail, which is what my email is also. That's through Switzerland, so it's comes under Swiss law. Safe as so that's your best option. So I'm not surprised these things are sort of happening. Yeah, look, our privacy is continually being eroded. That's true. Yeah. So, look, investigate Proton Mail as your encrypted mail provider. So, as you know, mine, Serpanos at Proton Mail. So. So Harry, do you know? anything about the main factors associated with anxiety and depression with diet. Look, I'm not a psychologist, but from my own experience, when you're on a lower sugar threshold in your diet, you're less anxious. The excitatory type stimulants are less there. You're much calmer. And that's what I found. What I found is energy and calmness being on because I've suffered depression, and the more animal foods that I put back, starting to do, my keto and all that sort of stuff when I had my, after my cardiovascular issue, I noticed that it wasn't only that my mood improved and my anxiety levels dropped and stuff like that, that, generally my health, on both the physical and the mental side improved dramatically.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with how it regulates your gut microbiome. Although it's a very nascent field of research. There's also seems to be an inflammatory component to anxiety and depression. I know both
there is
Paul Saladino and Georgia Ede, who are both trained psychiatrists, both feel there's a strong inflammatory component underlying those conditions.
Yeah.
I will say too that even with carnivore, if I overdo it on carbs, so if I have too much raw milk, for example, I will feel worse for sure. I'll have a little bit worse anxiety, worse depression. So it's not just about animal foods making it all go away either. I definitely feel better with the more fat that I have.
Yeah, and that's definitely it. You can overdo the animal-based carbs and protein and neglect the fat. Fat is very important for brain health and proper brain function. So yeah, and there's also a number of other things. There can be some people that can actually have like certain pathways, genetic pathways, which means that they need more choline in their diet, like myself. So there are other factors as well in that regard. So that means eggs and liver, those sort of foods, are very important. If you've got the same SNPs as me, so in that regard, so it can be a bit more complicated, but generally the fat component, the fat soluble vitamins is the big one. And I agree completely with Jared on that one. Now, I just lost my spot again. That was smart.
Fapnado's suggesting I try camel milk because it's legal in Canada where camels don't have hooves.
Is it really?
If I can get it, I don't know. Do you know of any camel milk suppliers, Fapnado? I'll try it. But yeah, I tend to just have my milk in toward the end of the evening after I've done what I need to for the day. I definitely I'll feel worse and kind of sluggish through the day if I have it too early. But generally speaking, I don't find I need to limit how much I drink of it if I just make it like with my last meal, sort of.
I don't know whether he's taking the piss out of us on that one or not with the camel thing.
I think he's serious.
Hope he is. Well, for your sake.
Thank you.
I'm pretty safe in that regard.
Yeah, just rub it in. I still have milk for now. I'm going to be out in 4 or 5 days.
I'm not going to be.
That's not nice. That's not nice. I thought we're supposed to support each other.
It's like waterboarding. Canadian gets waterboarded by Tasmanian.
Milk boarded.
Milk boarded by Tasmanian devil. Never mess with the Tasmanian devil. Haven't you seen those cartoons when you were young?
I did have a friend of mine say that they know somebody who has a farm that can sell raw milk, for pets. They just have to put not for human consumptions on the bottle or whatever. But
well, there's your option.
The guy hasn't responded to me, so I might have.
Okay. Well, yeah, there's got to be another avenue in that regard. I mean.
yeah, going internationally for it probably isn't the most sustainable route,
Yep.
regardless of whether there's a pandemic in place or not.
Yep. Yep. Even Chili Doug he's focused on trying to get his cream and yogurts and all that sort of sorted. Yeah, it's all, unfortunately we live in a time where we still, there's a lot of, pushback on raw animal foods. So, and unfortunately, it's just the way it is. Yeah, it is ridiculous that this situation exists in Canada. So, Harriet, in terms of making homemade kefir or yogurt with pasteurized milk, if raw milk is unavailable, look, it's not a bad option because just make sure it's not it's unhomogenized. Because that's when that's next level processing. Where they've damaged really a lot of the proteins and stuff like that. You don't want that stuff. So yeah, using pasteurized to make it as a kefir, yogurt with certain bacterial stuff and enzymes, if you can get the enzymes as well. Yeah, so that's,
I would say just start with a good quality organic pasteurized milk if you can get it.
Yep.
Definitely look for an ingredients list. It shouldn't have one. It should just say milk.
precisely.
And because a lot of milks have I forget what they're called. They're ingredients to make it so it will stay all in solution perfectly.
Shelf stable and the preservatives.
Emulsifiers.
Yeah, that's it. The emulsifiers, which are very nasty to your gut.
And but I would assume that homemade, especially kefir or yogurt, would be better than just pasteurized milk for sure.
Yeah.
The type of culture you get for your kefir and your yogurt also matters.
Yeah, that's precisely it. You've got a reputation, mate. You've really got a reputation.
It's me. I need a cigar, and I need to start saying, "Yeah, see."
Exactly. You've got a bit of the accent. Oh, you've been working on it, I see.
Yeah, that's how I persuade the border guards every time to let me in with my milk. The T Model Ford would tell me, no, well, the T Model Ford would have been like 20 years old by Prohibition. Well, I guess that's probably what I can afford anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Accurate.
That's it. There are a few characters on this. We've got some characters, especially Luke.
I need to look up Clyde Barrow now, just so I have an idea or remember what he looks like.
Oops. It's going out. I'm supposed to go to a barbecue now, and I'm thinking, do I really need to socialize with
you're supposed to practice social distancing for the greater good. Be responsible,
you're supposed to.
And don't allow yourself to get that positive interaction.
Exactly, you are supposed to, and and that's the thing. I've been trying to encourage with people as well. Let me just bring up. It was something that I didn't actually show. Where is it? In regards to, that's another bloody study on pneumonia and vitamin D, sort of randomized control studies that I was looking at. I'll bring actually this one up in regards to the coronavirus, since we just started talking about it. So this was is it going to come up? Yep. This was a Mongolian study on vitamin D supplements for acute, this is not, run-of-the-mill sort of stuff, acute respiratory infections. And, they actually looked at sort of dosing and their conclusion was that, the vitamin D supplementation significantly, let's see if I can increase this size. Yep. So that basically the risk of these sort of ailments in winter amongst Mongolian children, they actually reduced the risk. And that's the whole thing. Vitamin D isn't going to cure, respiratory infections. What it's going to do is it's going to reduce the severity. And that's the most important thing. Whenever you look at vitamin C, a lot of people say, and these were not even high doses. I mean, I've been looking at other studies up to 4,000, which actually show far more, better results at 4,000.
Oh, it's only 300. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm talking about for young kids, you're probably looking at, so think of the equivalent. So what do they recommend? About 1,000 so it's about a third. So if, a third is about like 1,500 potentially for, or 1,000 at least for children, so it would be a dose. And for probably teenagers to young adults, probably you're looking at about 2,000 IUs, and everybody else above that, you're looking at about 4,000 IUs. In that regard, you will basically support your T cells, which have got the vitamin D receptors, and at the same time, you'll basically, the importance of regulating collagen inside the lungs, which vitamin D3 does, is really important in that regard. Now, I did mention about ACE2 receptor. It's an enzyme, and in regards to my yesterdays, and there has been a bit of other people have been talking about it and actually mentioning things like that it may not be, a problem, but they're looking at epidemiology, and I'm not really convinced on the epidemiology stuff. I've looked at some of the clinical stuff, and some of the clinical stuff showed that this pathway was being used by the virus, and so people that smoke tend to basically make the virus able to hijack that receptor, or using that enzyme pathway to basically infect more rapidly. So, why people would say that because epidemiology shows no good association, that it may not be a problem, or actually maybe the reverse. The reality is, look, let's be honest, we don't know 100% about these things. I'm going on that clinical stuff. Really, it's a question mark. There's a lot of question marks in this, and we don't have a lot of science. I was looking at the SARS virus, which is another respiratory infection. It's a corona type, and it was worse than this one. Mm-hmm. So, much
higher mortality rate.
Yeah, higher mortality. It was 2.5 times worse than the current one. 2.5, depending on who you speak to 3. And this pathway was identified. So I can't understand why people would say that this pathway is not, just because you're looking at epidemiology. We know how bad epidemiology can be, confounded. So I'm not saying, I'm not putting my hand to my heart and saying, 100% yep, for this one, it's going to be the same as SARS. But, they're so similar, both corona type viruses. They're very similar in the way they affect the respiratory system. They attack the lungs, both of them. They're so similar, so why wouldn't they use the same pathway? They've been both identified in clinical studies, so why would people say that that's not the case? I put my hands up because, the definitive final sort of research on it, like they did with SARS, hasn't come out, so I can't say, yep, 100%, but anecdotally, it would make logical sense if the same pathway. It's one reason why I've said to people, stop smoking, in this period, get a patch, or get, sometimes because it's much easier, because you're used to smoking, it's easier to use the gum, the nicotine gums for that habit. So, do that for a while, sort of reduce the ability for that method of transporting into your lungs of working properly for the advantage of this virus. That's all I can point out to people. The other thing is let me just find out. There's a lot of people in the carnivore community, and I won't mention names, people know them, who the conspiratorial amongst us, that basically say, that the government's trying to get control of us and put us under, imprison us in our homes and all this sort of stuff. And no, that's not the case. If you look at basically the flu pandemic in the past, which had, if you remember, a 2.5%, so the contagious level, how contagious, the flu is 1.28 in terms of, how the contagiousness of it. With this corona, it's basically 3.28, so it's much higher. So the thing is, if you can have something like the Spanish influenza go through a population very rapidly, and they actually, this is an old historical stuff about lessons learned from, looking at St. Louis. They shut down everything, schools, the whole lot. Philadelphia didn't. They actually even had a parade for the war veterans and stuff like that, with millions of people going out. So what were the consequences of people not, heaving, and stop, this was a sign of the time, don't spit, because you're basically going to, provide a lot of, viral load around the place, which can potentially be picked up by air particles and end up in people, But if you look at the difference between Philadelphia and that didn't basically heed the warning, they had this massive spike where they had thousands, I think it was about 12,000 people turning up in emergency. They just couldn't cope. Where, on the other hand, because St. Louis actually closed down a whole lot of things and tried to restrict, telling people to stay at home, avoid a lot of social contact and all that, they flattened the curve. And by flattening the curve, what they did was they spread the disease over a longer period of time, but they didn't get this big, massive spike, which basically allowed a lot of people to die. Because a lot of people would die if you get this big spike, because the system just gets overwhelmed. And then you're in triage, and triage is you die, you live, you die, you live, you die, you live. That's what triage is. They have to go through that process because they just don't have enough beds or enough medicines, or enough doctors or nurses to basically look after these people. And that's where the problem lies. Look at Italy, that didn't heed this sort of warning. And what a mess they are in. They literally, have got beds out in the, outside hospitals all over the place. They just can't cope. It's a mess. That's what you get. Just look at that result. There's your result. When people tell you to basically ignore the risks, look at China, South Korea, and other parts that actually, Singapore, that really tightened things down very fast and took proactive steps in limiting the spread. They've, to a large extent, nipped it in the bud. Italy and other parts of the world, especially the US, have not taken the same proactive steps, and things have got really out of hand. If you think about it, 5%, that, the potential death rate that was in China. So let's look at it. If you were to spread rapidly the disease through the population of the US, which is 331 million at the time, at this stage, that's 5%. If you're basically not heeding the warning, that's how many people are potentially going to die in the US this year from this disease. That's what people need to get through their thick skulls and stop all this nonsense on the interwebs and talking all this garbage, because this old research shows exactly what happens when you get something which is very contagious. And this is even more contagious than the Spanish influenza. So, we're playing with fire if we don't isolate ourselves, and we're putting at risk a lot of people that we love as well. Your parents, your grandparents, your friends that are old, that may have underlying health issues. Even young people today have diabetes and other underlying health issues, and they are more vulnerable. Do you want to see them die? Because if the system gets overwhelmed, that is exactly what will happen to these people. They will die because the system will not be able to cope. You will not basically flatten this curve, and you will have this big, massive spike, and the system will collapse. They won't be able to cope with looking after enough people, and people will die.
That's something that I think Paul Mason touched on the recent interview he did with Ivor Cummins.
Okay, I need to go and see that.
They did just a little quick, like 30-minute discussion about it. I think it was posted yesterday, or might have been this morning.
Okay.
Anyway, Paul Mason had sort of.
He's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and these are the sort of things that we ignore at our peril. That we really need to isolate ourselves if we've got it. Encourage other people. Use vitamin D to protect ourselves. We need to do these sort of things proactively. Really important. I can't emphasize how risky this is in terms of contagion, and how far it can spread, and how many people it can put at risk.
My mom has COPD, and she's almost 65. But as you were just saying, age and pre-existing respiratory conditions are not the only things that predispose you to be vulnerable to this. It's also obesity and diabetes, which is something that when you consider the current state of society that you might see waiting in line at the grocery store around you, it's kind of sobering.
Precisely. What was it? If you remember the first corona virus, COVID-19 thing that I did was in regards to, those studies that were coming out of China. And that first study showed quite clearly, who were basically dying. It was people, the top group was basically people with hypertension. That's a large part of the population. Then the next one down, was CVD, cardiovascular disease, then diabetes. So, basically all these what we call inflammatory type diseases, or diseases of modern civilization, as Weston A. Price would call them, those are the vulnerable people. Those are the really vulnerable people that that can potentially be at risk. And our system can't cope if too many people. It's not that, look, eventually, as even the St. Louis sort of information showed, the virus did, go on for quite some time and spread throughout a large part of the population for a much longer period of time. But there's a difference. The death rates were much lower. Mm-hmm. More people survived, less people died.
Seamland touched on that exact anecdote, actually, just in his video that he released today.
Okay.
He may have seen that same article, actually.
Oh, he probably did. He probably did. That's a possibility. I haven't had a chance to, because I got up late today and I haven't had a chance to look at anything other than Bart, get a bit of comedy, and then sort of prepare for this. I'm not trying to
say that he beat you to the punch or anything. I just meant if anybody.
No. I think he's a good source of information. Don't get me wrong.
I guess he's self-isolating right now. Actually,
I've sort of looked at his fasting stuff, and that's where I've got a lot of my good information on fasting from him. He's pretty good at that regard. He's one of those people that go into nitty-gritty stuff about fasting. So most of my fasting knowledge, and as I said to people, when I usually direct them towards him. It's like I direct people towards Bart in certain things, or addictions to Pim, because they're specialised in those sort of areas. They know quite a bit about it in that regard. I mean, I know enough, but I'm if somebody wants to be consulted properly, those are the sort of people. And this guy's looked at fasting, to the nth degree. So here's a wealth of information in terms of fasting.
Yeah, he offers a lot of the kind of highlights the flexibility around what can be considered a fasted state as well, and what your
Yep.
goals are with a fast, and different things that you might actually be able to get away with consuming in small amounts and still call it fasting, sort of thing. And
Yeah. No, and I'm not concerned about copying. As I said, I share my information freely. I say to people, take it, post it, use it elsewhere. I've got no issues like that. Definitely. Because at the end of the day, just because I came first to it, or he came first to it, or whoever came first to it, that's irrelevant. It's just like saying, well, I came first to discovering this, and then somebody independently discovered it at some other point because they eventually did the research, looked at PubMed and found it. It doesn't mean, that's just nonsense. At the end of the day, what I'm doing is researching and getting information for my followers, like he's doing for his. And if it's the same, actually that's a good thing. That means we're basically on the same page, and we're basically getting good information across to our supporters. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the last thing we want is basically people putting misinformation out there or wrong information. We want to basically be putting good information. And I'm not surprised, so he's, look, where's he located actually? I think, is he in Finland, I think?
that sounds right. Yeah.
I think he's in Finland.
Northern Europe anyway.
Yeah. So they're quite far away from all this sort of issues anyway. So they're not very close to these sort of issues. It's sort of Southern Europe where the majority of issues are at the moment. I know that in Greece, because my brother-in-law just flew back, and we're a bit concerned about it because he's, the one from our younger sister's got diabetes. So we're trying to coax him, stick to what you were doing here, a more low-carb type, lifestyle, try and get some more vitamin D before until the summer where you can use the sun. So we're sort of trying to coax him in that way to be protective, because we don't know, especially when the tourism season hits, how quickly it's going to spread within Greece or whatever. So we've got no idea yet.
And we don't know. Estonia, sorry.
Okay. Oops. Sorry.
Oh, somebody just posted it to the chat too. I just looked for myself on his YouTube channel. Okay. His about section.
Okay. I've looked at some of his videos here and there, but I haven't basically, watched everything. It's hard. There's too much content, as people know. So, and especially nowadays that I'm creating my own, or focusing on doing my own research to prepare content eventually, more content. It's hard to basically watch a lot of people. So I've sort of gravitated towards, Bart, Pim, myself, sort of just a much smaller group of people that I sort of focus on what they're doing and saying, or collaborating with them.
Kind of similar.
Yeah, because I just don't have the time. But whenever I basically want to get any new information about fasting, I definitely do check his. Sometimes there may be a question, and I'll just Google, his name plus the specific part of fasting that I'm interested in, and then I'll Google it and see what he's actually said about it, and get some information. So, that's the primary use that I make use of his channel in that regard.
So, regarding the vitamin D supplementation, just from a couple of minutes ago, do you have anything to say about transdermal versus like oral administering of the?
Look, if you can get, there's a number of ways you can go with. You can either go with high doses, or and on an empty stomach with some fat. So because you need fat, it's a fat soluble vitamin, but you don't want at the same time too much food in there, So that's the other things. I usually have it, and then I'll have the fat right after, a bit after, a couple of minutes, like half an hour, and then but I won't have any sort of regular food. It will just be fat. So it gets into my intestines. It hasn't basically, the stomach hasn't basically taken any, and it's still resident in the intestines, and for enough time for me to basically put the fat in, because remember, it gets preloaded in your gut barrier. The chylomicrons in the all the lipid droplets are sort of sitting on the other side, and so when you actually, the technique is half an hour before you get the vitamin D there. Then you drop in the fat, and that sort of will incorporate into the chylomicrons and sort of get around your system through the lymphatic system. So that's sort of my thinking in that regard to get it into the system.
So you're thinking it's better to take it orally than to put it on your skin?
No, I'm not actually thinking. I'm talking about it's cheaper.
Okay.
Dermally, that's going to be much better. Liposomally, it's even going to be better than both, because liposomal is basically encapsulated. It doesn't matter whether you're eating or drinking or whatever, and it's got a fat component to it, and it will literally get through the body, and it's more guaranteed to get past the gut barrier, and
right.
But it's more expensive.
So I just use the hyper concentrated drops, the little bottle. It's like the 1,000 IU per drop. And I just put it on my skin. I put maybe between 5 and 10 drops on my skin each day.
Yep. Look, because you're gonna have
right around my diaphragm on my chest, kind of is where I put it over my small intestines.
Yep. You will have you'll have cholesterol in the skin, stuff like that. So the body will be able to, and fats. So the body will absorb it. Will be able to utilize it in that regard. That's not it. It's more about getting it through the gut, how to do it and stuff like that. So I found, getting it half an hour through so it gets through. So you're not basically engaging your stomach acid at that time to degrade that vitamin D going in, and then having the fat to for the fat soluble vitamin combination to basically give it that bioavailability side of things. That's how I've sort of gauged it in that way. If somebody can show me a study that shows that I'm wrong on that, I'm willing to change my tune. It's nothing's in concrete.
Harry proved me wrong, Serpanos.
Exactly. But when it comes to I don't religiously hold. Science is not something that is in stone. It's something which evolves continuously.
No, it's not a static state at all. Yeah.
It's not. And so we learn all the time. We nuance things. We have a deeper understanding and appreciation of certain biological processes. And the important is that we all grow and we learn from each other, because that will basically guarantee that we have a longer life and a healthier life by knowing these things, by understanding these things in a much deeper way.
It's a frontier, and I mean, while it's true that the focus of it may get narrower all the time with new information, there's never a complete picture known.
Yep, exactly. Let's get back into this. I've probably overshot a bit. And currently, Deborah says there are, in the United States, 40 dead, 31 in Washington. In the snake pit, there are 31, and 4 in California, and 2 in Florida. Well, you've got basically Washington. You've got more embassies. You've got more international travel, more people coming and going from different parts of the world. So it doesn't surprise me that there would be more infections in Washington. I suspect Washington D.C.
I think she means
Washington State.
State of Washington, yeah, because Seattle is where the outbreak sort of started for America.
Okay, really? Oh,
Seattle's where they had their first deaths, I believe.
Okay, so Washington
San
State.
Francisco's been tough too, I guess. But 31 people out of a single nursing home in Washington, that's a tragedy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it is. It is. It's surprising that you would. Well, Seattle basically does have a port where a lot of imports come in from other parts of the world.
Being on the West Coast too would have more people coming from China naturally too.
Yeah, China, other parts of Asia would be coming in into those ports
where the first cases started to emerge
on the West Coast. Yeah. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's the same thing with Australia, sort of the big, Melbourne, Sydney, these sort of the big cities that have got international sort of both travel and also the main airports for international travel, also the main ports, seaport lanes to Asia. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, so yeah, it's look, the reality is that if they don't get it under control, it could get far worse in that regard. I think some of the administrations, including the US administration, seem to be a bit politicking about it, a bit blasé about it, not as proactive. I think people need to be a bit more proactive, and the countries that have been very proactive, Australia, New Zealand, has actually even been more proactive than even Australia. So I take my hat off to the New Zealand government. I don't know about Canada, how proactive they've been in Canada.
It's been pretty reasonable. Well, depending whether you think that a government response like that is a good thing or not, but I think it's prudent.
Yeah, look, I guess we need to get rid of the politics, because viruses do not discriminate.
Yeah, Trudeau's because his wife tested positive. So
yeah, viruses do not discriminate. I mean, we had, for instance, one of our ministers down here get it in the federal government, and then basically he'd actually had a meeting with the Prime Minister on the Tuesday, and he got isolated on the Wednesday, and the Prime Minister said, no, the cabinet doesn't need to isolate themselves. They didn't check themselves. And on top of that, he wanted to go to, like, on the weekend, he actually went to an NRL game of rugby.
Well, they're not exactly modeling.
God almighty. And then he sits and basically lectures the people. It's like one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us.
Meanwhile, in Italy, they're leveraging fines against people for leaving their homes without a reason. So if you go for a run in the morning or something, you could get a ticket for like $300.
Well, that'll stop you from getting out of your house. Especially euros. That's 300 euros. That's a lot of money. Yes.
Luke, you need to collaborate with your favorite carnivores for that content that you want.
Yes. Good call.
Okay, maybe someone in the chat will have some insight on. I've been sort of puzzling over this little anecdote that I've experienced this week. So the Costco in my city sold out of toilet paper like everywhere else, and I was there last week and decided to look for myself, and they had paper towel and like boxes of tissues stocked where the toilet paper would be. I'm like, okay, that seems desperate, but I guess if you need those things, that could work in a pinch. And then I was in there again yesterday, and the paper towel and tissues were gone, and instead they just had energy drinks where the toilet paper would be. I'm not sure what to make of this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, look, it's a bit weird at the moment out there. I think people are desperate if they get locked up at home or they're limited their movements, that they may not have enough to, I mean, I can understand vegans and vegetarians, they do have a lot of bowel movements, excessive bowel movements. God, they probably order truckloads. Now it explains where all the toilet paper went. Into the vegan homes, into the vegetarian homes. Somebody's going to start a rumor. What does it all be, me? Yes. I wouldn't be surprised. Look, people basically, they usually prioritize two things: certain types of foods, and like canned foods, dry foods, and stuff like that. A lot of that's been gone. The other thing is meat has just vanished in large amounts. And I know that, yeah, I even did that as well. I went and basically stocked up on additional meat.
I'm really glad that I have a cow in my freezer right now.
Yeah,
That's turned
I've
out to
got
be one of the most
yeah, I've got half a
life-saving things.
lamb. I've got half a
That's good.
lamb in my fridge, so I've got plenty of meat. I just, because I don't want to be eating lamb all the time, so I went and got some beef, so I could actually balance out the two, and some fish. So, and just
Hey, if
basically
shit really
try
hits the fan, I'll just go on that Cole Robinson one meal every 3 days, ridiculous
exactly.
exercise at home with calisthenics, and eat my
Yep.
red meat.
Precisely. It's not we can survive in that regard, because we can fast, we can basically have one meal a day and stuff like that. It's, really the people that are eating the inappropriate foods, they're gonna be the ones that are gonna struggle, in this sort of environment. Yeah, that's really good that's one thing that I suggested on the last night, about 72-hour fasting to sort of reset your immune system. So if you're not contagious at this point, long-term fasts are very stressful to the body. But if you're not contagious and you don't have any underlying health issues, a 72-hour fast is really good.
Mm-hmm.
So consider that, because it actually resets your immune system. We're all battered with a lot of, inappropriate things that we've done and stuff like that. So it's probably a good idea to consider, something like that. I would say.
Yeah, the last time that I got sick actually was at New Year's. It was the first time I had had a flu like that in about 2 years. And it did set in while I was on a 72-hour fast, but I only had symptoms for like a little under 24 hours, basically, was the worst of it. So I was obviously already sick before I did the fast if I became symptomatic that quickly. And I'm thinking that the fast actually helped me get over it faster, even though I did get sick while fasting. But yeah, if you haven't done a 72-hour fast before, I would recommend it. Not as I would recommend trying to push that window, is what I mean. Not that I'm recommending fasting, I guess.
On this one,
the third day really feels different. Sorry.
Yep, that's okay. No, just finish what you were saying. I'll hold off on that.
Oh no, that was all I was going to say. It's just I had done a lot of 48-hour fasts before I did a 72, and I was really surprised by the difference in how I felt on the third day versus the first two.
Yep, that's true. My longest fast has been 6 days, but I can testify the same thing. Even when you're fat adapted and all that, you do notice that that my last one that I did was 80 hours. And right after that, sort of the 3-day thing, I noticed that big difference. It was like my brain, my body, everything sort of just seemed like it was, perky. It just seemed like I was just really in a special zone. And the funny thing is, because I know that, because I'd already done some other, short fasts, and I said, you're overdoing it. Too many fasts are not a good thing. So I sort of had to give up on it. But I can tell you, it's addictive, and that's why it's not, can be dangerous in that regard as well. Doing it for too long, we need to keep that in mind, guys. Actually, Honest has actually brought up that in Quebec they've already got a vaccine. I haven't heard anything, to be honest.
Me neither.
Yeah, and I hope it's not the Japanese one. The Japanese have been fast tracking their own vaccine, and there's anecdotal evidence that it can have reproductive problems for young people. And look, if you're trying to save a lot of old people, yes, I would say to bite the bullet. But even there, I'm sort of I'm conflicted. Let me put it that way. I believe that things that have basically been tested properly, like antibiotics or vaccines, and when they are necessary for major communicable diseases, I'm supportive of them. Because you just have to go back 100 years to see how endemic for thousands of years humanity was riddled with pathogens and dying left, right, and centre. So I don't want that period to come back in that regard. But at the same time, when we fast track these things, we only have to see that when they fast tracked certain vaccines for soldiers in the Iraq War for, against certain chemical weapons, there were a lot of bad side effects, and a lot of soldiers suffered a lot of health problems by fast tracking, not enough, testing and all that. Sometimes the cure is worse than the actual, than the disease itself or the problem. And so I am a bit concerned if it's the Japanese one or similar to the Japanese one, because there
They're
could be a
saying they
lot of.
have a vaccine candidate is the phrasing that I'm seeing in
Okay.
the headlines.
So they don't have an actual vaccine. They've got something which still needs to be tested whether it actually works
Quebec
or not.
City biopharmaceutical company announced it has produced a virus-like particle of the coronavirus that may be able to produce a vaccine against COVID-19.
Okay, so it's still, because as I said, I've looked around and I haven't come up against anything. There's a lot of things in trials. There's even some drugs that are in trial at the moment that show that they can basically limit the actual death rate substantially. But the problem is they're still in trials at this stage, so nothing's really out there. So
but
the key thing,
I want them to test the vaccine adequately. I'm not interested in sterilizing myself against this.
Precisely, and that's the thing, because you don't know what the long-term side effects are, especially when, we're not as old and at high risk in that regard. So yeah, I wouldn't be putting my hand up immediately for that one. Yep, vitamin D, very important. And, washing your hands and stuff like that, and sort of, sneezing or coughing in the appropriate way so you don't spread. Because the problem is when you just sneeze like that, because these are normal things. Sneezing and coughing is the body's way of getting rid of toxins or getting rid of pathogens out of your system. So that's a good thing. Actually, also like the Japanese study that I actually showed about the gargling, that's really important as well. With the iodine, we need to get it out there for people to know, get the message on social media, and let people know that, get off my pinned information and use that information and pin that to your Facebook account or whatever. Get people to know that if they've got respiratory infections, that they can use this gargling method of iodine to basically reduce the severity of the respiratory, because it's pneumonia and respiratory diseases that kill you in the end if you're vulnerable. So we need to get the information out.
Gargling like a solution of Lugol's in water or something like that?
Well, you can do it two ways. You can actually, you can just put a small amount into water and dilute it in water and gargle that. That's 3 times a day if you've got symptoms. The other thing you can do as well is some people do like nasal sprays, like putting a spray and sort of nasal spray to clear out, so their sinuses and all that are cleared from any infectious sort of agents. So that's another thing you can do. There's a few things in that regard of using iodine. Now, I sort of say to people, if you can buy iodine drops and use those, they're much better. But if you can't, a cheaper solution, and I've mentioned that because cost is an issue. Not everybody can afford these sort of things, with a lot of other costs of living standards pressures that are on them. I've said you can buy salt that's got iodinized salt that's got iodine in it to some extent, and just gargle that, put it in water, mix it, dilute it in warmish water, and then basically gargle that a couple of times a day. So at the end of the day, we're trying to basically reduce the severity. We can't eliminate these sort of problems, but we can reduce the effects on people.
So how is it that iodine, when you gargle it, that it's effective that way?
What was that?
How is it that gargling an iodine solution will help a respiratory infection?
Well, I think it actually iodine actually has this antiviral, antibacterial effect. That's where
Yeah.
it's coming
Okay.
from.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So
Like
that's
the
the
actual topical effect of it, you mean?
exactly. So
Right.
this is a sort of thing. It's a bit like even vitamin C has a funny sort of thing. Has antiviral, antibacterial property, but also has like anti-adhesive properties. And that's why I said to people, maybe because anti-adhesive, if a virus or can't adhere to a surface as well, it can't penetrate as well. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It becomes more vulnerable and less ability to proliferate as well. So there's a lot of things we can throw in our toolkit that I've mentioned in the most recent one where I went through a whole raft of points. I even touched on the red light and infrared, sort of stuff, and infrared saunas and whatever, all these sort of things. I went through a whole entire list of different things you can do. Better sleep, even though I wasn't better sleeping last night. Anyway, the sacrifices that I make for you guys. Anyway,
It's a tireless
so
job.
oh,
It's a
tell
duty.
me
I
about
mean,
it.
tireless duty.
They keep on reminding me and telling me that.
People pay people for jobs. Is why I make that distinction.
That's it. That's it. We're all volunteers. Look, with the current stuff that's available, no, I wouldn't take the risk. I'm not in the, I think I can survive this without actually taking this, with all the other things that I'm doing. But if let's say something really good came along, yes, I would. But it'd have to be basically, something that, let's put it this way, I'd probably wait until a month had gone past and a whole lot of other people had survived on it, and then I would try it myself. I know that sounds selfish, and I know that sounds, but that's probably what I would do. I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm just saying what I would do. I wouldn't be rushing in immediately. I'd be using all the other steps of isolating myself, minimizing, using vitamin D, using the sort of gargling and all that sort of stuff, and then consider that. Especially, if you're in Japan, definitely don't use the current Japanese one if you're young. If you want to be sterilized by your government accidentally, because they are scared as shit. And typical politicians, they're reactive. They only think about the consequences later on. That's their problem with them. Oops. Let's go back a bit. A bit short. That was a comment. So, g'day, Chris. So, I've trouble accessing RS information on my 23andMe. Look, 23andMe actually just provides general information. They don't actually provide specific SNPs. They actually just do a general, susceptibilities. They just give a general thing. What they do is they actually provide the raw data. Then you have to go to both free and paid sites to get a sort of like a genomics rundown. And that's what I will be doing. I will be doing something where I'll be looking at a number of diseases, and I may actually even consider doing it sometime next week, where I just go through. I've got a list of SNPs, and I'll go and explain a number of diseases and issues, and the things like MTHFR, choline, beta carotene, certain other susceptibilities and issues like that, and cover those sort of main ones that most people are concerned about, and just go through them and actually show the actual what the risks are and stuff like that, and then you can use that video and then look at your own stuff and then do a comparison and say, okay, I've got these SNPs, I've got that SNP, or I've got this vulnerability or whatever. And so I need to make these adjustments to my diet, like I did with choline, adding more choline because I had those weaknesses there. So that's the only thing I can provide at this stage, or otherwise you can go through paid services that can actually, they will upload. And I will actually show some free sites as well that you can actually use. I don't have the links here. I've got them at work because I downloaded at work and I had all the links there, but I haven't transferred the damn things, my favorites from work. I need to do that. I'm always forgetting to do that. So yeah, so I need to bring that information with me, and I can actually show you the actual websites. Yeah. So yeah, it is much higher in liberal states in terms of, because they haven't been as proactive in that regard. But there are other factors, not that merely that they're liberal states, but there are other factors that are at play. Some liberal states are better than others. Depends. If you take a look at New Zealand, which is a liberal state as well, it's got a Labor Party, which is a sort of social democratic party in power at the moment. And they are actually, far more proactive than that. It's actually not. It's a sort of a mixed government. It's actually, you've got a nationalist sort of right-wing party, which is a minority party, which is a New Zealand First Party unified with the Labor Party, which is social democratic. So it's a strange sort of alliance, let's put it that way, that's in New Zealand. But they've been pretty proactive in sorting out their shit, and they've got some of the lowest rates of of this coronavirus spread. So I think it's a mixed bag all over the place. I think some countries, because I think it's more cultural, some countries have a certain culture. Yes, it may have evolved because of the politics of that country as well. I don't doubt that. But also there is a bit of a culture of many years that certain populations have and all that. But even within countries, as you saw, the Philadelphia and St. Louis information, even within America, there are different cultural attitudes and behavior and local government sort of and approaches that different communities have, in the way others are more proactive than others or deal with things. Again, have you got a population that's more mobile? That's another issue. In some parts of the country, in different countries, population is more mobile. When you've got that, there's not much of as a stronger community. There's not much that connection. There's more sort of a divorce between local government and and the population, and there things can go a bit awry as well. So it's a very mixed bag in that regard. It's really hard to pin it down to a specific thing, because the moment you say, oh, it's that sort of society, then you can find the equivalent in another the opposite type of society, exactly the same thing. So yeah, I think it's more cultural than anything else, both internally in societies and externally among societies. So it's a bit different. So he's camera shy. Oh,
you can do it, Luke. You could just create like an avatar to show on screen instead of
exactly. Just sit behind it, or you can basically send me your image and then I'll modify it. I'll really make it look good. Trust me,
just
this is a trusting face
and print it out on a piece of paper in front of your face.
I think the funniest thing, that guy that actually, Bart actually sent me a message after the actual his live stream about that comedian, vegan comedian that was actually making play acting Bart in that. And
I don't think I saw that.
Oh, didn't you? Oh, it was hilarious, so funny in that regard. In this morning's live stream, he actually showed clips of this guy basically.
Oh, okay,
yeah. And so
I didn't see the round table this week. I was busy.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And really, I mean, people that have seen it, and he sent me a message and said, I sent him a message back. I won't state what I actually said in regards, but I did give him a couple of ideas of whether to approach and do a comic thing. I mean, it's sort of a, the olive branch type thing. You never know. My angle was, if it actually comes to pass, God, are we going to get some laughs out of it if that angle is approached? But I can't say anything because I don't want to upset Bart, Uncle Bart, from one uncle to another. Not only do I only go 2 or 3 every 2 or 3 days. When I go, it's usually only a wipe. Yep, you're fine, and most carnivals have the same experience. I can remember my days when I was on a mixed diet and I consumed quite a lot of carbohydrates. Even when I was doing keto, I consumed quite a bit. I would go through far more toilet paper than I would go today. So yes, that's very much. I think
smearing experience.
I mean, I sort of, was seeing what's happening, and I was going each time, and I wasn't finding any, and my rolls were dwindling. And after a couple of weeks, I'm going, I need to go really early. So I got up because I was down to 2 rolls, and I said, so I actually got up really early in the morning, and I was literally one of the first people to walk into the supermarket. There was only about 12-ish, sort of packages of toilet paper, the 24 sort of pack. So I've got that, and that will last me now for ages. So I'm covered with toilet paper. So it was just basically getting up really early and getting it. In that regard,
I'm gonna need some in the next week or so, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah, I suppose it must.
You'll be out.
Must be much scarier for people on plants.
You'll be hosing yourself down, won't you?
Yeah.
I actually said that to my sister. She started laughing, and then she thought about it and goes, "I don't want to be doing that." And she's just recently. That was my older sister, and they're struggling because her whole family, trying to find toilet paper. And her husband tends to, go to the toilet because he still eats a lot of carbs and all that sort of stuff. So he's been going there. They've been in lines, like people have been waiting outside the supermarket in lines, and they've actually put the toilet paper in a different area, and you can only have one each time. So it's crazy. It's really crazy. This sort of end of the earth. It's not the end of the world. People, I don't know. It's just madness. I think the other option is you can use online, like online. Some of the supermarkets have got online facilities, and they'll bring it to you. And sometimes that may be actually easier, because then you just get it ordered. When it becomes available, since you've already paid for it, they have to make it available to you, and so you don't have to run around like a mad, chook with your head cut off, like most people are doing currently, in that regard. Yeah, look, pretty much people are insane. JG Lee, you're spot on about that. It's just, even, I mean, I can tell you, I've got no sanitizers in terms of sprays or anything like that. One, they've got a lot of antibiotics on them and stuff like that, and I think that there's actually acid on your skin. I actually learned this from a vegetarian woman years ago, that there's actually, and I actually did a bit of research. There is actually, if you look at it, is acid. You try to allow your fingers to actually like sweat quite a bit, and you get this sort of like acidy fluid, and then touch things, how you stain things with your fingers very easily. We have this sort of thing, and it's a protective layer. When you actually use a lot of this sort of stuff, soap is good to use, that's fine. But when you start using a lot of these antacids, antibacterial stuff, you wipe a lot of that protective layer away. You're actually opening up your skin to absorb things much easier from the environment, and that's not what you want. So you basically should be, if you want to actually increase the acid, actually using a citric. She basically, that's the other thing. I need to go down to that vegetarian sort of homeopath, it's sort of a naturopathic sort of store. They've got a lot of things like that, and I need to actually, because I usually get my soap there, because they've got really good quality soaps, plus they've got the ash in it and everything. The way they used to make soaps years ago. I get the one with goat milk in it, and the thing that I usually they have things like citric type. They are much better. You can clean your hands as well. It'll remove most of the pathogens and stuff like that, which is what you want. Something which is acidic and stuff like that. At the same time, it reinforces that layer on your fingers and hands. So that's the sort of stuff you want. You don't want this sort of nonsense that people are using out there. That's how bacterial resistance and everything else happens. That's the last thing we want to add to our misery. We need to stick to natural sort of stuff, not to unnatural things.
Yeah, there's also a natural skin flora that's on your hands too that helps to make it a hostile environment for anything that doesn't belong there. So
Precisely.
hand sanitizer does just that. It sanitizes your hands, which isn't necessarily a good thing.
No, it definitely isn't. So you don't want, basically, you want your natural stuff that's on your skin, because that actually acts as a competition in a sense as well. So there's plenty of studies that show that. So in that regard, I think you've got one of your remarks from Chris.
That was in response to me calling the One Wipe Wonder from Prime Health.
Okay, yes. If all else fails, shower soap better than standard methods. Yeah, look, I mean, the good old traditional soap. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have any. I used to have some really nice Greek olive oil made soap with ash and some of the with minerals and stuff like that. Some of those old traditional ones. That was a good one, but it's really hard to get in Tasmania in that regard. So it's just one of those things. Went over time by accident, 100. When I calculated my break time wrong, and then I started. You're fast, yeah. Look, Ozma, it's unimportant whether you did longer. I mean, I was intending to do 5 days, and I ended up doing 6. So I wasn't. I sort of don't encourage people to do over a week anyway, and I was getting close to a week, and I'm going, "What are you doing?" And I actually had to stop myself because it can be stressful in that regard. Spot on, honest sleep, some fasting, cold showers, good nutrition. All these things are important to strengthening our bodies. So when we do get hit by the actual virus, we're going to be a hell of a lot. And I'm currently in a status where I'm trying to communicate with one of the guys. He was basically sitting right next to me. He flew in on Thursday. And he got a phone call on Friday, because he turned up on Friday to work. He sits 2 meters away from me. And basically he was told to go home because somebody on the flight had the virus. And so I said to my father, don't come around. I didn't even my sister left on Friday. She flew out because she's off to WA.
So are you self-isolating?
And basically I didn't even go and see her. I said, look, I don't know. I said, I need to wait and give him a phone call and find out on Monday, because I can't communicate. I've been trying to communicate with him. So I'm actually isolating myself currently. So I don't know what my status is at the moment. His exposure was very little, and my exposure to him was very little. So he wasn't symptomatic. It's 24 hours. So even if he was at the early stage, he wouldn't be contagious. You know what I mean? Based on what they're telling us. But am I 100% sure? No. And I said to Dad, do not come around, because he usually comes around for a coffee sometimes in the afternoon on Sundays. And I said, do not come around, stay at home, avoid me until I know what my status is. And so the same thing with my friends. I said, look, because usually Saturday night we have a meal together, a bit of chat and stuff like that. But that's last night didn't happen, and that was another reason, gave me an excuse to do the Corona thing, because I had the time, I was at home. So basically, yes, I don't know what my status is currently. So am I worried? Not really. I'm much fitter, healthier than what I used to be. All my cardiovascular tests have come back really good. That I'm in much better health. I'm eating, good quality foods. So, I should be in good nick to survive. The only thing I do have an injury on my knee. I actually misstepped, injured myself, yeah. So, and sort of fell over and well, anyway, long
That's
story.
where the coronavirus will seize hold, Harry. Your knee.
Yeah, it will in my knee and basically kill me from my knee up. So I'll end up with sepsis or something like that. So I've basically been trying to bring down the dam. So I said, how many other things do I need in one day? It's like compounding all my other issues. But look, these things are going to happen. I mean, it's not that person's fault. I mean, they had no idea. There were very few people on the plane, and and it was a domestic flight anyway from Melbourne to Hobart. So who would have known? That would have been somebody on there who was an international traveller. That basically ended up on that domestic flight to Hobart.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've got 3 confirmed in the south of Tasmania and 2 confirmed in the north. 2 were initially, we only had 2 in the north. Now we've got 3 in the south, and it's been primarily from people from outside the state that have flown in from overseas. I think I'm not sure which part of the world the other person had come back from. I think they came back. Not 100% sure. I think it may be in the Philippines, but don't quote me on that. That's what I heard. But he basically took off, and I came back and I said, what the hell? And it was lunchtime, and I go, okay, I'm going. And I left. So I basically, I spoke to my general manager, and he said, look, if you don't feel good and all that, he kept his distance, but if you don't feel too good, don't turn up, so call the hotline, and do something about it. So I'm a bit peeved off in that regard that, but what do you do? It's just basically, it's not really, there was something that I did actually, if I can find it. So yeah, but where was that? Probably won't be able to. Just bear with me for a second. Nah. Yeah, look, when it comes to these sort of things, it's hard to say in that regard whether. Yeah, let me put it this way: I am a bit worried. It's just normal. It's human nature to be a bit worried in that regard. I mean, I'm, yeah, it's sort of, yeah. I'm to be honest. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure whether, but I may be just overthinking it and that sort of stuff in that regard. So yeah, look, let me stop thinking about these sort of things. Hold on. Oops.
Well, you're doing your
wrong
best
one.
to limit
Next
community
one.
spread, which is what's important for people who are vulnerable.
The second one, iodine, that's the one you really want. The other one is like a salt thing with, I think, what is it? My head. I think there's something about on the two type of atoms. I can't remember it. It just doesn't come to me. Yeah, but you want the second one, the iodine. That's the one you want. The other one's like a salt type thing. No, you don't want that. You want the iodine. And you want to get it in sort of a droplet form. It's a sort of like a concentrate. Actually, Jared, do you know what they usually call those iodine droplets? They've got like the formulations. They've got a specific name for some of them sometimes, or
I usually hear it called just Lugol's iodine.
okay, yeah. I just can't remember the actual name for them. Oops, now
I'm not
did
sure.
it again. I just lost my.
I have heard of supplementing iodine transdermally as well as it being less risk to overloading your thyroid.
Yep.
So that would that make sense that you're?
Yeah, look, there is. You definitely,
that way.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to overdo it in terms of, I tried to get like iodine from natural sources like fish, like like eggs, like organ meats, those sort of things. That's where I stick. I don't supplement iodine. This is for gargling.
Yeah.
You gargle and spit it out.
Yeah.
Or as a nasal spray to spray your so your one of the part of your mucosal system to basically, which will react. You need to sort of clear out or whatever it's captured in terms of pathogens and reduce the sort of
topical effect, like wiping it on your skin before.
Yeah, precisely. Well, exactly. You could do that as well. You could use it, but it's expensive. So you'd use it.
I used to donate blood pretty regularly, and I reacted to their sterilizing pads that they would put just the skin here, and and my elbow is very sensitive.
Yep. Precisely.
And so they would use iodine for me, and it'd be stained for a week. But
exactly, and that's right, and you can, and that's its whole purpose. It's really good for I mean, they use it, in surgery and stuff like that. It really clears things away. So it has its efficacy, but it's expensive, and that's the thing that we need. Now let me find my location while I was basically contemplating existence about whether I'd be still here next week. Let's be honest. I mean, we all, sometimes think the worst. I have to be honest. I'm human. I feel. I've got feelings. So I'm a bit concerned. I can't say that I'm not. Yeah, it's a sort of it's the salt mix. It's combined as a salt. They come into it's a combination, so you can use either one of them. Let's say it's the cheap man's option, and that's the thing that I said to people. You can go for that salt combined form to get, because even salt itself has antimicrobial sort of properties, antipathogenic properties. So it's a cheap way, because not everybody's going to, I don't know what people's finances, I'm not going to say, well, you must use this. At the end of the day, you want to keep that viral load, the effects down. Obviously, if you're going to use it as a nasal spray and all that, the iodine is probably the better option to go for. You're going to get better results, but yes, you're going to pay more for it. So keep that in mind in that regard. And another one of Chris's, my data is version 3. Yep. I think that's one of the latest ones. I'm not sure whether mine is that. I'm not sure, Chris. But yep, you're welcome, mate. At the end of the day, it's trying to get the message out there, trying to provide information for people, how to sort of customize what I call genomics customization of your carnivore diet. Yeah, and I mean, I think I'm starting to get traction. Even Bart now is coming around to basically saying, yep, he mentioned it in today's, and he said, look, genomics does play a role, and Harry has a specific SNP that basically has to eat certain foods with more choline in them. So there is slowly a recognition by more people in the carnivore community how important that to know your genes and how they affect you in that way. I'm here to kick Vegetar's ass and drink raw milk. Yeah, that'd be typical of Luke. I could see a poster, a potential poster, Luke, with basically you kicking, or me, the double-headed monster, or the nanomotor man, with his milk, his raw milk, kicking a couple of vegetards. Is that giving you ideas, creative ideas?
You need to Photoshop Harry's face over top of Roddy Piper. Am I misremembering that? That's who said that line, right?
Oops.
Yeah, from They Live, right?
Yeah, that was Fapnado, and about the sort of the Quebec thing as well. I've sort of, I'm in two frames of mind in that regard. I don't want to I wouldn't be throwing myself, right over a month ago about scientists going back and forth between, okay, yeah. Look, there are scientists that will move around. There's, it's part of the just general, the part. A lot of them are listed with the World Health Organization, and they do move around and use facilities around the world to assist them with their research, because it's not enough. It's important to basically spread the load. I mean, CSIRO in Australia, which is our nation type major research body, they've also been looking at this coronavirus as well. So trying to understand its how it actually emerged and stuff like that. I mean, they agree with the sort of the hypothesis that it is a bat-type virus. And the reason why they do that is because we've had a similar bat-related virus in Australia that goes to horses, then from horses to humans. It's not as virulent, but it actually kills, and it has some similar characteristics. So we know that the likelihood that it's from a bat source is, becoming stronger, because the Australian evidence has actually reinforced that that's the likely sort of vector from the animal kingdom to humans. So, and I'd have no reason to doubt the scientists at CSIRO in Australia. Yep, a lot of us did. Memories. You just go to the toilet and have a few of those old memories. I got mine on Amazon. Not sure about this. Is that toilet paper?
Yeah, brag it up, Mr. Has toilet paper.
Yeah, definitely soap will do. Yes, that's safer. And I mean, I'm not averse in getting like a citric base, like soap solution. That's probably another good thing in that regard.
Soap is just mechanically removing things, not killing things on contact.
Look at the facial expression there. I think he realizes maybe I'd be nice. It would be cute.
I'm telling you, Luke, you can Photoshop yourself a great mask.
Harry's right. Yep, overuse of antibacterial soaps can actually make your skin more susceptible to infections by causing micro fisheries in the skin. Yep, that is true, and a lot of the research shows that, the overuse of these sort of things is just not a good thing, guys, in that regard. Canadian company says it has made. Oh, that's the thing that I think Honest actually brought up earlier. Yeah, but that's still, we're still in the early stages, so we don't really know, where we are. I'm not against flu shots. Sometimes there are periods in the year where periodically I won't do it necessarily every year, but periodically I do it now and then. And the reason for that is just to give my immune system, because over a number of years or a couple of years, the protein structures on the outside of the flu virus will actually change slightly. And as a couple of years, it replicates differently. So your body has greater difficulty in recognizing it and preparing for it. And as I always use the example, the North American Plain Indians and the Aboriginals in Australia, when Europeans came to this continent who had the Eurasian viruses already in their system, and when they hit these populations, had no protection, a lot of them went by the wayside. And that's why, we're talking about, like in North America, in some parts, 90% were wiped out. So to think that basically, something new that comes, you shouldn't basically have some. The reason why we don't have communicable diseases or big death rates like we used to have once upon a time is because of vaccinations. As I said, vaccinations aren't perfect, but they're a necessary evil. Yes, they do affect a smaller number of people in a negative way, but compared to millions dying, I would rather that than, it's sort of, again, triage. It's sort of a balance. We are getting better at this sort of stuff, but we're not perfect. And, so, yeah, it's sort of, we shouldn't be sort of black and white with this sort of thing. I can tell you.
I think I've got about 15 minutes left in me. I'll go to the top of the hour here.
That's fine. Not a problem.
That'll be 1 o'clock.
Yep.
My time.
So, what's Luke saying? Fuck. I think that is my PPLs. One of my apartment friends was having a cough, and they were claiming light fever. You're fucked. Say hello. Nice having known you. And shortness of breath. Oh, that's a big giveaway. Shortness of breath is one of the key. Yeah. Look, it could be the flu, the seasonal flu. But, think the worst. It's probably corona. Nice having known you, Luke. Can you do that other...
Send over those Photoshops quick, would you?
Exactly. Do that quickly before we lose you. Just for posterity, things like that, So... yes, you're fucked. So, yeah, shortness of breath, and it's not only fever, but shortness of breath, because it's a respiratory. and they do go hand in hand. So anyway, he's not a vegan,
Not a
is he?
comfortable feeling.
No, it wouldn't be very comfortable. Let's put it that way. So yes, could be a problem. I was booked to go to New Zealand early June to see my family. Obviously not happening now. Yeah, a lot of people, that's, I was basically going to go overseas to Southeast Asia as well, to Bali. And I haven't booked it. I was about to. And then this sort of, I go, I don't want to be stranded, because potentially I could get stranded on either side of the border, potentially for months. Who knows? So I was sort of going, nah.
Yeah.
Not the right time to go. And I mean, I feel for the people that are affected because of the, but, in that regard, and I overshot again.
If I get stranded in the United States while I'm there buying raw milk and they close the border, then
you won't care.
Do you think that they'll let me have raw milk at least until I figure out how to get home?
Don't know. It depends if you're put into a detention center and fed and fed, their regular slop. Can you imagine grains and slop and oh god? You'd go, please kill me, put me out of my misery.
Yeah, that would make me sick if I wasn't already.
Yeah, well, yeah, you may not be able to get in. You're in Europe, so unlikely. So you don't know. I mean, it's look, my old man's 85 and Chris, so your dad's in his 80s. Yeah, I'd basically, get the pneumonia vaccine, the severe one at least, get him to go to the doctor and get him to give him that injection, and also to up his vitamin D, and some of the other information that's on the last YouTube and the previous one. That's all I can, suggest. We're chatting about all sorts of things, mate. So in that regard, it's.
Here we go. Sorry, I got a cat here who's making a bed behind my laptop, pushing my screen down.
I can believe that. Osman just gave us a plug.
What are you doing? You don't want me to talk about you? No, I don't.
Yeah, I think I will be, mate. I think I will be. Even if the guy that actually ended up at work, let's say I got it off him, let's say, as an example, potentially not, because he wasn't only there for half a day, but he's still, about 2 meters away from me sitting. So don't know. But I think with my current diet and lifestyle, I should be okay in that regard. I'm well prepared for it. I don't, in that regard. Fabnoto just pointed that out. Yeah, exactly. Oh fuck. Luke's been given been told by Fabnato.
I suppose I can't criticize anyone for showing up late when I was late to the live stream when I'm invited to co-host.
You just got a plug. I've been struggling to win off it as well. Apparently people have been playing games. It's just a general Q&A, nothing major, but we've been talking about the coronavirus. We've been talking about general health issues and stuff like that. It's just a mixed bag of things. Raw milk, and Jared's difficulty in basically being able to access it if the borders, restrictive ability for Canadians to cross the borders.
Help me. Send milk.
Send milk.
I'm trapped in a milkless desert.
Yes, exactly.
It's a milk desert.
Yeah, pretty much. You're in basically a milkless hell.
That's much more accurate. Thank you. Milkless hell.
That's what basically CSI Row think. Not now, not at the moment, mate, because the Japanese one has a lot of side effects and some of the others are problematic. Maybe at a later stage they may come up with something better. Currently, our strategies are vitamin D, using iodine for gargling, for respiratory infections, stuff like that. Good health, good nutrition. That's our best strategy at this point. If something good becomes available, there are not only vaccines, but there are also some drugs that they've been testing that are showing even better promising than in order to suppress the virus compared to and without the sort of issues with some of these early vaccines. So we don't want to basically rush like the US military did with the anthrax type vaccines and created too many side effects for people. So that's the last thing. So need to be a bit careful. It's this
if I know
panic.
Hail Man talking about vaccines, he was definitely being sarcastic, but that's still a useful recap for anyone who wasn't here.
You can use liposomal stuff. So that helps as well. Or you can just have it on an empty stomach, so you don't have any. I usually say to people, if you're going to have vitamin C as a supplement, you don't need to go to the liposomal, which is expensive. You can go on an empty stomach, so you can get it. It's water soluble. Get it into your system, and basically you don't have any competition on the GLUT4 receptor on your cells. That's the key thing, because if you're having carbs, or you're going to have competition. So that's what you want to. Guess who turned up late? She can hear. That's Butter, isn't it? She's really.
Oh yeah.
She's really vocal. She probably heard milk and said, what?
She's got a little flutter to her purrs.
Look, it helps, but like anything, it helps to some degree. But vitamin D is going to be your main thing. In terms of respiratory infections, vitamin D is the key thing. It adds. If you can get it from the sun, even better. But if you can't, you're in a cold environment. Vitamin D will basically add additional. Will activate those receptors on the T killer cells. And they're coated with vitamin D3 receptors. So basically that's what you want. That's going to be your most effective method. These additional things like vitamin E, from the diet, vitamin C, supplemental stuff like that. That's just some additional sort of stuff that can help you along in that regard. You can use coenzyme Q10. You can use a number of other things. You can even, go and buy yourself glutathione if you really have got money to splash around. At the end of the day, allopoic acid, another good one, as a big electron donor that can recycle most of all these things. So at the end of the day, even Butter agrees. At the end of the day, it's throwing things in your toolkit. The younger you are, you probably need less of this sort of stuff. The older you are and the more underlying health issues you've got, you may need to support yourself as much as possible. We can only provide the best type of approaches. Nothing is 100% in this world. So, and there are no 100% warranties. Simple as that. We can only go on the studies and the science that I've shown you about, the randomized control studies on vitamin D, on the iodine, on these things, how they can help. That's all we've got to go. That's the best science, and it's usually, a lot of it's randomized, double-blind crossover, which is better than most other things. 30 hours of sunlight in the last 3 days, yeah, perfect. The more sunlight you can get, the better. That will basically be your best protection. In the past, people used to be in hospitals. They used to bring them out into sunrooms.
Yeah, that's true.
The sun is so healthy. I think, the way they build hospitals nowadays and homes without sunrooms and stuff like that is just a crime against us, let alone encouraging us to put a lot of cream on, which is full of toxins to basically prevent the sun, from hitting our skin. It's just madness. The only reason we get
really looking forward to the return of the sun.
Yeah, I don't blame you. We're going out. We're heading into the winter.
Get out there at the peak UV.
So he's got a issue with suffered from eczema problems. Strict carnivore diet, but eating oysters for the copper seems to improve it. Yeah, look, I've basically said organ meats, mussels are very important. I don't recommend a steak-only diet, and I've been arguing that point, that it creates long-term imbalances, and everybody's genetics are not the same. So, and copper is required, in terms of the iron metabolism. So it's very important in that regard. So, I know a lot of people have different opinions. They say you can survive with steak only. Some people may do okay. They may have a lot of the genetic SNPs that basically help them in that way, but not everybody does. And so I would not be giving a blanket recommendation as some people in the carnivore community do. I think that's ill-advised for long-term health for the majority of people.
Okay, I think I need to go get to bed.
You do?
Yep, it's 1 a.m. I will not be feeling good in the morning if I push it much later than this.
Yep. Look, thanks, Honest. Yeah, mate. Look, if you need to go to bed, go to bed. I'm going to be winding it up, in probably the next 10 to 20 minutes. So there'll be a bit longer. Just go into the last questions if there are any, and then basically wind it up myself. As I said, keep safe. You can only do so much. You really, at the end of the day, we're trying to, the reason for basically keeping, self-isolating yourself or doing things, or, not going to events, and encouraging, if you're in organizations, to stop these events temporarily, is that curve. Remember, St. Louis, literally went into lockdown, and when they had the Spanish influenza, they dropped that curve line. And so, yes, they spread out the disease period for longer, but they dropped the curve line, and more people survived because it didn't overwhelm the system, where other parts, Philadelphia, didn't. And they had 12,000 people turning up at hospitals. It just, the system couldn't cope. And a lot of people died as a consequence, because then you're in, we don't want to get into a situation of triage where doctors are saying, you can live, you can die, because doctors don't want to do that either. And nobody wants to find themselves in that situation where family members and loved ones are in that situation. So we need to focus on that. That's really important, that we get the message across that we need to basically self-isolate. We need to basically take precautions. We need to, encourage our people close to us to improve their nutrition, to minimize the effects on their body. Now, I better let you go, mate. Thanks for, being part of it.
Sleep is an important part of minimizing the effects on my body.
Precisely.
And when you get to be my age, it's more important.
Oh, look, Grandpa, I understand. I really feel for you. I don't know. I don't know about the others, but good seeing
All
you,
right.
mate. Thanks for
Yeah,
being
likewise.
a co-host on today's live stream. Appreciate it. Take care, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah,
You know,
I assume something similar next week.
if I'm still alive.
Right, right.
Yes,
I'm sure you'll be fine,
I'm,
Harry.
I'm waiting for the Corona beast to break down my door and rip me to pieces.
I think you might know somebody with some advice on how to minimize your cortisol and your stress. That's you.
That's true. Yeah, but you're probably right about that. As my friends say, bloody hell, Harry, you're so chilled out. Yeah, well, why worry about things? You can't change. You can't reverse history, and you can't change things radically. Only with yourself and the people close to you. So, you know, so yes, I do live a fairly stress-free life nowadays compared to my past. And sometimes some of my friends say you're too relaxed.
All right. Well, here's to a stress-free week, and I'll see you next week.
Exactly. Thank you. Take care, and thanks for being part of this today. See you, mate.
Yeah, no. Thanks for having me. See everybody.
Well, it's me. It's only me. Now let's see what other things I've missed. Probably quite a few. Frank mentions a lot of things. I'm confused a bit with Frank, whether he's got this, that, or whatever else in that regard. If you're eating animal foods and you don't have gut permeability issues, you don't have stomach issues, you really shouldn't have any of these issues. I mean, I consume a lot of fermented stuff. I've never had any histamine issues, and I've been doing it for years. So even in my bad days, so I'm confused with some of the stuff that Frank says. To be honest, it seems to change every now and then. So unless you look at somebody's blood works, unless you basically have certain privileged information, because I actually asked him, and he didn't email me, so he ignored me. So without really knowing, I did send him some suggestions, some information about, because he thought that he may have liver issues or stuff like that. And I said, well, look, there was a doctor in Texas who basically I believe it, can't remember exactly whether it was Austin, Texas or not, that actually used a method where there was a whole lot of patients that had basically consumed some mushrooms that were poisonous because they thought they thought they were safe, and ended up damaging their liver. And he used alipoic acid, which was one way, which is a super electron donor. And you can find it in liver and animal foods of that sort, in organ meats. And basically, it was in high doses, was able to prevent them from dying. So, and that was one thing that I said to Frank, just buy yourself some liposomal alipoic acid. Then a couple of days later, other things came up that he actually started talking about that maybe this or that or whatever. No idea, mate. Sometimes I'm not sure whether, it's part of the show or not. So, I'm pretty much over it in that regard. Yes. Yeah, if you get on his nasty side. I mean, I had yesterday some guy hounding me and giving me a hard time when I was doing my Corona thing. And I still put up his comments, even though I disagreed with him in that regard, because at the end of the day, I'm here to provide information. Yep, people will disagree with me, but at the end of the day, it's just the way it is. I mean, not everybody's going to agree with you on everything, you know. Yep, it definitely is, Chris. Comedy is definitely an underrated medicine. So yeah, you endorphins, being happy. I'd say if you're sick, just download a whole lot of comedies and watch them. That's probably the best thing you can do. Between your sneezing, your coughing, and your laughing, you're probably going to help yourself. I mean, even in some hospitals, they actually use clowns and stuff like that, which helps improve people's, they don't feel down, and making them feel happier, because it all helps, the placebo effect as we know it. There's a couple of folks on my channel that got iron overload and ended up in hospital. Unless I know their circumstances, mate, you can't diagnose without data. You don't know other things that they may have done, whether they took any drugs or they did other things that basically could have caused the problem, or whether they took supplements, heavy supplements, what sort of things they cook in. There's no way of actually knowing these sort of things. We can speculate for ages, but unless you have details, it's next to impossible to really know what may be causal or not in that regard. G'day, Bart. Good to see you, mate. I did mention that we loved the comedy today. We really enjoyed it. So we had a ball of a time. So any more questions, guys? We've been going on for about, what is it now, 3 hours, 2.5 hours. So after this, Pim will watch the 5K video. Yeah, look, I'll be doing the same thing. I'll be, after this, be watching that as well. That will be funny. I hope you read my email and my suggestion. Yes, I think that would be really, really comical if you could get him on and do that sort of combo of comedy. Oh, bloody hell. That will definitely break the YouTube. That will be funny as. So, yeah, good luck with it. You never know. I mean, sometimes people, yeah, things may happen. Well, guys, if there are no more questions, we've been going now for 3 hours, we're creeping towards 3 hours. There any specific ones on the current coronavirus or anything with in regards to that? Any last minute things people want to ask? If you find, just go and check the other video that I did last night. So that went on for a while. So I probably need to get a bit more sleep tonight because I didn't get to sleep until about nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. So, but it's just one of those things. What do you think about the role of wild fruit in our ancestral diet? Well, it probably would have been used seasonally. That's all. For 1 or 2 months. It depends, and it would have been basically in different parts of the world differently, and it would be, if you're basically in a temperate climate, it would be for very limited time because the temperatures are much lower. So you probably would have only got a 1 or 2 weeks. See, even nowadays in temperate climates, just naturally, you probably get just about a month and a half. You don't get a long period of time. I know from mountainous areas in Greece, it only, like certain fruits and all that are only ripened for about 4 weeks. That's it. Sometimes even less than that, depending on the fruit. So it's very limited so there is no way that ancestrally that basically could have been the case. It's nonsense in that regard. Let me just bring up something in terms of, it's stuff that that me and Bart have talked a lot about. I'll just see if I can find it. was one thing that I was actually looking at. This is basically from my favorite institute in the world, the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. So if we look at this now, let me just increase the actual size of that. Okay. So they've done the definitive studies. I mean, you have to remember that German archaeology in the 1920s and 1930s basically was able to go around the world, Africa, Asia, all over the world, and they were able to collect massive amounts of specimens. They've got some of the best specimens in terms of hominins over the last 3 million years out of any other place. So Max Planck Institute is one of the best, and they've done all the nitrogen isotope analysis in that regard. And I'll just go down to the parts where they actually talk about the Neanderthal diet. The Neanderthal diet was highly debated. They are traditionally considered carnivorous and hunted large mammals, but this hypothesis has been recently challenged by numerous pieces of evidence, plant consumption and all that, the vegetative crap that we've talked about. Ancient diets are often, so let me just go down to the part that actually, okay. They were apparently occupied by high portions of terrestrial food chain, exhibiting slightly higher rates than carnivores like hyenas, wolves, and foxes. So their isotope analysis actually has shown that the Neanderthals were more carnivorous. They found this found at that same site. So they're looking at within that same locality what were other predators doing in comparison to the Neanderthals. And then they basically discussed that they basically, it's been suggested that these slightly higher values in isotope, nitrogen-15 were due to the consumption of mammoths and putrid meat. So, high meat, as some people call it. And we also some examples of cannibalism as well. Well, then when they also talk in regards to modern humans who arrived in France shortly after the Neanderthals had disappeared, exhibited even higher nitrogen isotope rates than the Neanderthals. It's something that I've been saying for ages, that basically that humans, in terms of nitrogen isotope analysis, Homo sapiens, seem to be even more carnivorous, so you've got Neanderthals that are very carnivorous, even more carnivorous. This is etched in the actual bones and enamel of the humans, So, yes, they may have had some plants. They may have used some plants for medicinal purposes. The shaman would have basically given out if somebody had a disease for the hormetic effect, but it's not their food. It's not what the isotope analysis shows. And I've done even the ancient Greek one that shows that even populations in more modern populations, were far more carnivorous than we actually believe nowadays. So in terms of that, they also, there's also a bit of an interpretation that fresh fish consumption may play a role. Fishing is supposed to be a typical modern human activity, but again, a debate exists whether, or not Neanderthals were eating aquatic resources, so there's still arguments about these sort of things. It's a bit like, when I look at the isotope analysis of the ancient Greeks, most people think Mediterranean diet, people eating a lot of fish. No, they're eating some small fish close to the coastline, but that's a small amount of their diet. The majority is terrestrial animals, goats, pigs, the Spartans loved pig foods. They had a whole lot of dishes regarded to pig, pork. So, in that regard, so these are the sort of things, and where was it? And they actually found that there were some Neanderthals that had similar ranges, that means high, carnivory, like modern humans. And they think maybe they were actually eating fish as well, because slightly the isotopes are a bit higher, but at the same time, as if you're in the middle of France, there's not going to be a lot of fish around. Let's put it that way, in my sort of vernacular. So, when you look at this ancestral information, it's quite clear that what we were basically, because of the high meats and stuff like that, that they consumed. We were basically what I call flexible scavenger carnivores. So we may use some plants here and there for medicinal purpose or starvation foods or whatever, but primarily our focus is on high quality, calories. I mean, all animals in nature focus on calories, your highest order. They don't go for the lowest order. They're not going to eat the vegetables. That's the last thing they're going to do. They will go for the most nutrient dense. You don't have a supermarket out there, and you don't have guaranteed food supply all year round. So you will maximize and pursue the most nutrient dense foods you can get in your environment to maximize your reproductive success. So it makes no logic in terms of evolutionary science. It just to even consider that plants played an important role. They played an insignificant role, and if they played, they were just basically as a supplemental, additional free food, for a very short period of time. And even in the tropics, where there may be more consumption, and that consumption, if we take a look towards the end of the ice age, yes, the potential for tropical fruits became more available, and that's where we start noticing this shift in the basically the ApoE genotype. And I will do something on that to explain how over the last 3 million years these adaptations and changes to lipid metabolism actually happened. So I can demystify, but I'm not going to give it away now yet. But I will make something like that on it. I've been working on it. It's a sort of a long. It'll be in 3 parts because it requires a lot of things to explain how we moved, how we shifted. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, it's agriculture." No, it's not, because the ApoE33 actually emerged 200,000 years ago, and the 22's 80,000 years ago, pre-agriculture. So it's a bit more nuanced and complicated. It has to do with climate changes and stuff like that, and food availability of certain types of species and stuff like that, and changes in the environment, the food environment over that period. And that also affected brain size and all sorts of other things. So it's a much more complex picture. You will have to wait and be patient. Oops. We look forward to these sort of things. You know that, Luke. Harry, do you think in 2 weeks, no symptoms, things is real? Look, it's hard to say, so in that regard. Bart's going live in 5 minutes, so I'm going to get off to give him an opportunity. So for you guys to switch over, and I will switch over as well. Look, I will grab that. Let me just see if I can copy it. Nope. It's always pretty hard to actually grab it out of the actual StreamYard. It does annoy the living daylights out of me. Love it, mate. Love it. Love it. Let me put that on. Perfect. Oops. Uh, yes, I'm here to kick veg tart ass and drink raw milk, and I'm all out of raw milk. Mate, I love it. I absolutely love it. You've outdone yourself. Fantastic. You need to do one of Jared as well. You know, you need to do one of him and with his Al Capone type hat and stuff like that, crossing the border with moonshine milk for next week. So he should be on. Anyway, I better get off. Give Bart a chance to get his live stream up and going. Thanks, guys, for today, for being here. Appreciate it. As always, like and subscribe as the message underneath states. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Same time, same place. And take care. Look after your families, and get the information out there. Share it on different platforms, Twitter, your YouTube sort of your discussion part, your Facebook account and all that, and get the information out there how people can actually protect themselves and mitigate and reduce the severity, and why they also need to self-isolate and stuff like that, to keep that curve, that sort of exposure curve down, so we don't have the effects. So we end up more like St. Louis, where not many people die, rather than the big spike that we saw in Philadelphia. We don't want to repeat history of 1918, the actual Spanish influenza effect. Thanks for the. Okay, see you guys. Take care, and we'll chat later. Bye.